Welcome to Backstage, Leicester's little theatre podcast.
Welcome back to the Theatre's podcast, which we've been putting together at a time when there's some more positive news about the theatre than we've had for a good few months. Although there's still great uncertainty about a second virus wave at present, and no one can predict how things will change in the weeks and months to come, at this moment the theatre is planning to reopen in December. We'll find out a bit more from Chair of Trustees Andy Crooks in a moment. In this episode, we also hear from long-standing member Karen Gordon on her highs and lows at the Little. We look at the role of the theatre in launching members into the theatre profession. We hear from West End director Gary Lloyd about working on Thriller Live. And actor Sebastian looks back to his time working with the Little's patrons, Lord Attenborough and Sir Anthony Hopkins. Not to mention our very own John Hendrie. And there's something a little spooky just in time for Halloween. Those of you who are theatre members and have read the latest edition of the theatre's newsletter, Scene, will already know that the theatre is planning an initial opening production in December. I caught up with the Chair of Trustees, Andy Crooks, in the theatre to ask about the plans and what's been happening behind the scenes over the summer. So it's been a strange summer with the theatre being closed, but I am actually in the theatre office with Andy Crooks, who's the new head of trustees. Andy, presumably that means that there must be some progress.
There is, yeah. We now are looking at opening to the public again in a COVID-safe fashion. We're planning some concerts, which will be at the beginning of December. They will be open to the public to come and see. And John Gent, who's one of our most experienced directors, is in charge of that. So it should be a good evening. And of course, we'd be very grateful to the performers who are giving us their time, and they'll be treading the boards for the first time since March, really. But we're looking at performer safety, backstage safety, audience safety, and the safety of the crew out front.
It's obviously been a difficult summer. I mean, traditionally the theatre is much quieter in the summer months, but that's not been the case behind the scenes, really, has it?
Well, we've opened the office with trustee support. We have someone in the office now weekday mornings, and the phones are manned. One of the main things that those trustees have been doing is looking at the Panto tickets that were sold for this coming Christmas. And as the Panto has been postponed for a year, we've been able to transfer most of the tickets over to the new dates in 21-22. We've been very pleased by the number of people who've accepted that. They've supported us by keeping their tickets and not demanding a refund, for example. And we've also had some donations from all of that process, so that's been quite positive. The backstage teams have been looking at what they can do with the socially distanced rules that we have, and we've now started to do some work nights 2 days a week, and that's what we're doing tonight.
It's still going to be quite a difficult period ahead though, isn't it? Because there are, even though the theatre can open, there are still some quite strict guidelines, necessarily strict guidelines in place from the government. What sort of impact is that going to have on the theatre, both financially and organisationally?
Obviously the main one is the number of audience that we can have in a safe arrangement. We think we could seat somewhere between 130 and 140 people, leaving space around groups of 2 or 3 or to 6, because obviously that's the maximum bubble at the moment. So financially our audience income will be between a half and a third of what it used to be. We need to organise ourselves front of house in a different way, because we have to think about an audience coming into the building and perhaps having a one-way flow of traffic, if you like. So they come in one door, go out another door, and we need to supervise in the theatre itself, so people are not rushing out at the interval or at the end of the show. They'll have to be supervised, those kinds of things. So there's a lot of planning going on. We're hoping that the rules don't get any stricter, but we think we can work with what they are as we speak now.
Certainly at the moment we're speaking just before the restrictions come into force in the northeast, and who knows what will happen moving forward in the next couple of weeks when this podcast may actually go out. But it is encouraging that there's a lot going on, and it's encouraging that the theatre can look towards opening. What sort of shows do you think we'll be putting on in the months after we open in December?
Well, we're going to go very gently into shows because it's a learning curve for all of us. As I mentioned earlier, performers and the audience alike. The audience will have to wear masks, for example. We're looking to open with 3 nights of songs and entertainment with, I think, a Christmas theme, and then probably not do anything else until January, when we're looking to have some outside musical society input. So it's going to be a series of, if you like, one-night performances. We're not anywhere near putting on a week of a play yet. It's far too early to consider that. After the musical events, we've got some offers from directors to put on some plays which will have very small casts, so that helps the distancing on stage and backstage. In December, January, February, we're going to try some one-night events. Some will be music, some will be plays. We're just going to see how it goes. So I think really that the message to anyone listening who's thinking of booking a ticket for one of these shows in the next, as they happen, is that we're taking great notice of the guidance that the government has produced. We also have good guidance from the Little Theatre Guild, of which we're a member. There will be a lot in place that we can refer to make sure that we are COVID safe.
It's really great to hear some positive news about tentative steps towards getting the theatre open again after 6 months with no on-stage activity and precious little income. And I think we shouldn't forget that the total closure of the theatre has resulted in the terrible loss of virtually all of the theatre's paid staff. With no income, the Little, like many theatres, has faced the stark choice between losing its staff or losing the theatre itself. It's not only the enormous pool of knowledge, skill and talent that we're losing with our staff, but the fact that, through circumstance rather than choice, we are forced to lose both our colleagues and friends with whom we've worked for many years. And our theatre is not alone in facing such choices.
There are many superstitions relating to theatres and acting, so in this section of the podcast we'll delve into the most enduring and well-known theatre beliefs. Those of you who engage with the Little Theatre on social media will have seen a post earlier this year from trustee and director John Hendrie about the practice of leaving a light on in a dark or closed theatre. This is known as the ghost light. Superstition has it that this is to ward off mischievous spectres and spirits that theatres seem to attract. And after all, theatres do seem to attract ghosts. And during the start of the COVID shutdown, the image of a light left burning on a stage in a dark theatre became a strong symbol of hope for the future. But what was the original reason behind the ghost light? Some sources seem to suggest that it's the ghost of Thespis, the first actor in the 6th century Greece, who is the reason behind the more spooky tales of the ghost light. It's said to deter his more flamboyant hauntings. But sadly, the ghost light has an entirely practical purpose. It stops the unwary falling down orchestra pits or off the stage as they search for the elusive theatre light switch. But in the COVID era, the ghost light was a powerful symbol, its constant burning light representing the enduring spirit of theatre, even in the darkest of times. And if they keep the odd ghost at bay too, maybe that's not such a bad thing.
The lifeblood of the Little is its membership, and it's always welcomed new members to act on stage or work backstage. And many of these have then gone on to make the theatre their chosen career. Mary Harding Scott takes a look back at some famous and not so famous of the theatre's alumni.
Over its nearly 100-year history, the LDS has continued to forge links with the professional theatre world. Some members have come to our theatre whilst taking time away from the business, whilst others have used the society as a springboard to begin their pro careers. Not limited to those who perform on the stage, the LDS continues to see the transition of members from all the theatre's departments. But taking a look at the diversity and variety of these members helps to demonstrate an important role that the society plays within the broader theatrical community. The obvious place to start is with Richard Attenborough. The blue plaque on Dover Street reads, "Lord Richard Attenborough made his first appearance on the stage in a production by the Leicester Drama Society, here at the Little Theatre in 1937, aged 13 years. His family had moved to the city from Cambridge when Frederick Attenborough, his father, became principal of the University of Leicester. Richard made several appearances on our theatre stage before he moved to London. An illustrious career followed, beginning as an uncredited sailor in Noel Coward and David Lean's film In Which We Serve. Attenborough quickly established himself as a favourite in both film and theatre. He made his feature film directorial debut in 1969 with Oh What a Lovely War, after which he continued to develop his career behind the camera. Throughout his life, he actively engaged in charity work for various organisations. He became a patron of the LDS and remained a loyal friend and supporter of the organisation. Lord Attenborough was not the only member of his family to be involved in the society. His brother, broadcaster and naturalist David, also performed at the Little Theatre, and their mother was the Society's president from 1936 to 38. One of the other most recognisable names amongst the LDS's alumni is that of playwright Joe Orton. He was active in the Society towards the end of the 1940s. Having already written a series of unpublished books, Orton's first play, Fred and Madge, was completed in 1959. Over the next decade, he had several dramatic successes, notably including The Ruffian on the Stair, Entertaining Mr. Sloane, and What the Butler Saw. Whilst Orton and the Attenborough's achievements are clear to see, the LDS has provided a starting block for many other members to move into the professional world. Now, John Carter, who is a Society member more recently, discusses how our theatre has helped him begin his career as a stage manager.
Hi, I'm John. I currently work as a freelance stage manager in theatre. My first experiences with theatre, though, really came from the little. I joined in 2013 during my GCSE years with an interest really in sound primarily. I expressed that quite early on, and probably within the first year was given the opportunity to sound assist on a production of Journey's End. And soon after that, went on to do some sound designs on a couple of shows. And that led me up to my university years, where I went off to study at the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama in Cardiff, with a course that was a mix of stage management and tech theatre, which I personally found as a great opportunity to get a grounding in all backstage theatre. And actually, it led me to shift my career towards stage management. So then after I graduated, I started freelancing as a stage manager. Last year, I took on a contracted position with Chichester Festival Theatre in the stage department. So that meant I was stationed there for about 6-7 months and worked on some really great sort of large-scale productions. But more recently, I've been freelancing again, working with more local companies like Bamboozle Theatre in Leicester, who work with children with learning difficulties. So there's a real mix of opportunities that come from working in theatre. You know, I'd really encourage people of all ages, if you are interested in theatre, to get involved at the Little, because there really are chances to go in with one intention and change that as you work, and you only discover that from giving it a go, really. So yeah, and I'm very much looking forward to getting back into theatre when everything's up and running again.
More about Lord Attenborough a bit later in the podcast. So just prior to lockdown in March, Pip Iliff talked to West End director and choreographer Gary Lloyd about working on his dream show, Thriller Live.
Theatres in London's West End are also in the dark at the moment. I caught up with professional choreographer Gary Lloyd to talk about a new book he had just released to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Thriller Live. Gary, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
For the last 20 years, I've worked as a director and choreographer in London's West End and in music and television. In 2008, I was given the gift of a show, Thriller Live, about the life of Michael Jackson. This show has been a very big part of my life, and a lot of stuff has happened. And when you work in this industry, particularly as a director or as a creative, things happen that you hear yourself saying, nobody would believe that.
So, tell me about your book and what readers can expect from it.
The book is an autobiographical look at my journey as director and choreographer on this show. Readers will not only discover how I put my work together, but they'll learn how Michael Jackson informed and inspired my professional work from as early as 10 years old. As a male dancer growing up in the Northeast in the 80s, Michael Jackson was somewhat of a superhero for me. So getting this show, as I said, was a gift, and that's a big part of what I write about. You'll also learn about putting together a long-running show and all of the highs and lows that come with that. It's a real backstage tale, and there are many colourful characters that come and go, and lots of amusing anecdotes of things that go horribly wrong, both backstage and on stage. There's also some really moving retelling of stories of some people that have really touched my life along the way.
And what prompted you to write about the show?
I was spurred on by a dad friend of mine. We were dropping the kids off at school, so at the school gates we were chatting about my passion for writing, his passion for Michael Jackson. He is actually a writer and an editor for a paper, but loves MJ. So we were discussing that and batting that back and forth. And it was him that said to me, "You've got the 10-year anniversary coming up. Why don't you put all this down in a book?" So I literally went home that day and started putting my notes together.
Who do you think will enjoy your look at 10 years of Thriller Live?
I think the book appeals to Michael Jackson fans, that goes without saying. But I think anybody that's a lover of theatre, that loves to hear what goes on behind the scenes and what, spurs us as creatives and as performers. I think anybody that loves a good story, because a lot of this reads like a novel. These stories are so colourful. It at times does feel like fiction. And anyone that loves a good story, really. I think, budding creatives interested in how theatre works, both backstage and how the nuts and bolts of the performance and a show are put together. So it does have a wide appeal, not just for people who love Michael Jackson.
Thank you, Gary. So, if you are interested in finding out more, My Life with Michael 10 Years of Thriller Live is available now from bookshops and online retailers.
Thanks, Pip. Now, for something a little closer to home. If you regularly take your seat in the Littles Auditorium, you cannot fail but to have seen our next guest perform on stage. Karen Gordon is one of the theatre's most accomplished actors, and she also plays a very active role behind the scenes.
Right. When did you first go to the Little Theatre, and what was the first show you worked on? Well, I first went to the Little Theatre as a member of the Lansdowne Drama Workshop, who were based at the Y. I joined that company because I wanted to get involved with drama. I had no idea that the Leicester Drama Society existed, but a colleague of my partner was a member of Lansdowne and had said, we're always looking for people to do props and walk-ons and prompt and so on, all the jobs that the existing company didn't want. Can I say that? And so he said, send her along. So I went to the Y and duly did props, painted sets and had a couple of parts in their productions. My first appearance at the Little occurred because there was going to be a festival of drama. And the Little was hosting that festival of local societies appearing for 1 or 2 nights. And it was the self-penned epic Cluedo the Musical. I had a walk-on as a police inspector when we did it at the Y. But when we came to the Little, I was suddenly promoted to the dizzy heights of Miss Scarlet. Anyway, I visited the Little to discuss our set requirements with the legendary John Hendrie, aka Frida, aka Gladys, because this will mean nothing to people who haven't met him, sorry. And I think he was stage managing the festival. And I just walked into this auditorium and thought, what an extraordinary place. Saw his set for Hobson's Choice on the stage, thought, what a beautiful thing. Adored him on site and his assistant, John Hunt. And was so bowled over by the whole setup that after not falling off the stage or making a total fool of myself, I hope, in Cluedo, I decided to try my luck with the Leicester Drama Society. Anyway, I started actually with an art exhibition in the upper foyer, rather a roundabout way of getting involved, and then did props on a couple of shows, like Laburnum Grove, My Cousin Rachel, which is great because obviously you get to know everybody. You may be sitting in a corner preparing to hand a cruet to somebody, but it's I would urge anybody, do everything if you want to get involved, when we can get involved again in drama. And the new member secretary, Jenny Page, suggested that I join the Thursday workshop, which was being led by John Gent, who is, of course, a man with extraordinary experience and expertise in theatre. And I did so, and it was invaluable because I really knew very little. I was quite a good sight reader, and I think that was about it. And it led to my joining the company of John's 1994 production of A Christmas Carol, which was an extraordinary production because it was a huge challenge for every department. I think it stretched everyone to the limit. A big company, great for getting to know people again, and we'd sold every ticket before the opening night. So there was an incredible buzz around the whole thing. Robert Sansom was a wonderful Scrooge, and really it was a perfect introductory show for me because lots of quick changes, got to go on singing carols, do some narration, do a couple of parts, and it was the start of everything, and I'll never forget it, and I really appreciated the opportunity. Right, next question. What have been your favourite, most memorable shows over the years? Right, who do I leave out? This is a really, really hard one. I think my first really special show was An Ideal Husband. Lots of my early shows I got to wear corsets. I kept my hair at a certain length so it would go up into a hairpiece because I always seemed to be being cast in period roles, which I loved. I loved playing the posh birds, basically, because they get the best clothes, right? And that's why we do it. And the director was Alan Chambers. And I remember when we were first off book in rehearsal room, and I was playing a part with Geraint Griffiths, who was my husband Robert, and my rather priggish character Gertrude Chilton was saying, you know, you've totally let me down. I made an ideal of you and you've just wrecked it all. And then he had a wonderful rejoinder and stormed out, and I collapsed onto the sofa, which was probably 3 plastic chairs stuck together to form a sofa, and tried to cry. And I never did manage to cry properly, to my great chagrin. But anyway, I then looked up and Alan had tears in his eyes. And I thought, yes, we've got him. And I said to Geraint, we've got to make him cry at every rehearsal, which sounds terribly sadistic, but I did it through love. Anyway, so that was a wonderful experience. And the whole show, just magic, except I nearly fell down the stairs at the matinee. But that's, again, another story. I'll have to mention Hay Fever, my other favourite author, Noel Coward. I've done the part of Judith Bliss twice with wonderful casts, and it's a dream role and just a joy. And also, of course, The Graduate, because it's one of the iconic roles for a woman. And thank you, Mr. Gent, for trusting me with it, despite the fact that I don't smoke. And my great memory of that is waiting to go on stage and Simon and Garfunkel's Sound of Silence playing in the auditorium and me holding a cigarette, preparing to light it, because they said, Karen, we're never going to make you look like a smoker. Light it off stage, then come on. And so there was the late, much-loved Martin Pennell, who was stage managing, standing there with the fire extinguisher. I lit my cigarette, walked on with my stomach churning to see my wonderful Benjamin, Andrew Joshi, and we were off. And I think my best moment in that production was when I had to inhale a mouthful of smoke, be kissed by Benjamin, and then exhale very, very slowly, which for a non-smoker, I have to say, is a lot harder than taking off all your clothes, which of course I had to do as well. And at just one performance, I just exhaled this perfect stream. It was like a genie coming out of a lamp. And I got a round of applause. So there you go. I'd also like to say any show I've ever done with Mary Jones has been an absolute privilege and a joy. What's been your high point in a little theatre show? Well, I love to hear an audience laugh. And in Man of the Moment, directed by Mary Jones, I played this character described by the author Alan Ayckbourn as a total monster. I had a speech that I had to deliver to a character named Douglas. She goes off on one and shouts at him and says, "You are the most boring man." And then Adam just stood there. And he heard a little ripple in the audience. And the ripple increased. And with the most exquisite timing, he delivered his line, which was, "How sad." And the auditorium exploded. That was a really memorable moment, but among so many. So, what's next? What has been your funniest experience in a show? This has to be with one of the funniest men I've ever worked with, and it's, again, the late lamented Les Wilson. Roy Johnson cast me as Principal Boy Colin in his production of Mother Goose in the year 2000, and Les was playing the title role. And one day, Les came on stage without his bosom. He'd forgotten to put on his padded bra. And Jan Frost had some fabulous ad-lib. She managed to ad-lib and point out the fact that you've forgotten everything that you've always dreamed for, including those, has flown away. And you could see Les was about to go and so on. And then I had to go on stage. It was a great moment. What can I say? Right. I also work backstage in different capacities. And what appeals to you about the different roles? Well, as I mentioned earlier, my first involvement with the theatre was doing props on the Burnham Grove, and I'd done a little bit with Lansdowne, but I was pretty inexperienced. And I had a great deal of help from a wonderful lady called Peggy, who had been a member of the society for years and years and years, and she was incredibly friendly and helpful. And I really believe that to be a good society member, but the more things you do, the more departments you get involved with, you're a better society member. You know, there are always jobs that need doing. Not everybody can be up there having a great time in their hand-sewn costumes and beautiful wigs. So, yeah, I just say, again, anybody who, it's great if you've got a bit of a hiatus. There have been seasons where there was simply nothing that I could realistically audition for, but I still wanted to be involved. Okay, do you have any other creative interests outside theatre? I do, and I have to say it's been a bit of a lifesaver during lockdown, and that is very circuitous. I started at the Little Theatre with an art display, and it's what's kept me sane, I think, during this period. I've done 3 portraits for NHS Heroes, which was very satisfying, and I'm really, really busy drawing and painting. It's something I can do from first thing until the light fades, and I just love it. And I'm always aware how much I have to learn, just as with acting. And if I had to give one up, I'd be really, really hard pressed to say which I'd let go.
We all look forward to seeing Karen and all our acting members back on stage as soon as possible. Now, earlier we promised you a bit more about our former patron, Lord Attenborough. Actor Sebastian not only started his career being directed by Lord Attenborough, but he's acted alongside the theatre's current patron, Sir Anthony Hopkins. And as icing on the cake, he also spent part of his early career working with the Little's own inimitable John Hendrie. I talked to Seb to find out more.
Hi, my name's Sebastian and I'm delighted to be taking part in this podcast for the Little Theatre in Leicester. Now, I actually worked with Richard Attenborough years ago on A Bridge Too Far, which he, of course, directed, and, of course, Sir Anthony Hopkins, who played Colonel Frost. We went over there and I joined another team of actors, about 50 of us. We went out there and undertook 3 weeks training to represent the iconic men who held Arnhem Bridge in 1944. Colonel Frost, who held the bridge, was played by Anthony Hopkins, of course, and Richard Attenborough directed the movie. So that's how I met Richard Attenborough and Sir Anthony Hopkins, both patrons of your wonderful Little Theatre Leicester.
Do you prefer acting for film or on stage in the theatre?
Well, I actually love both. They're both very different, but in some ways very similar in that on both occasions you're striving to tell the truth. I obviously love working in the theatre. That's where I started. That's where you find yourself as an actor. And I remember I worked with Lindsay Anderson at the Lyric Theatre, in the Lyric Theatre Company, with Joan Plowright and Helen Mirren and a wonderful cast. We were doing The Seagull. And I'd just done a play for today, played a nice leading part in it, playing an intellectually challenged farm labourer, what some would say typecasting. Anyway, I had this on video and I thought I'd show it to Lindsay and say, look, what do you reckon? So I went to show him, I offered him the tape, and he said, "No, I don't want to look at that." He said, "I never cast from television." He said, "I always cast from theatre into film." Because if an actor can hold an audience on stage, then he's liable to be able to do it in the cinema as well, because they're both very similar in that you have an audience sitting in a darkened room, all focused on the same story. My father was an actor, and he said that you should always approach a new performance by doing what he called telephone box acting, which was like really, really small acting. And then once you've found the truth, because it's you've got to find the truth, and you find that when you're doing it small, if you do it too big initially, it can get warped, the truth, as it were. Whereas you do it very gently to begin with, very delicately, get it right, and then for the theatre, it's rather like putting a very intricate painting on a balloon. You put an intricate painting on it of a face on a balloon, and then for film, you just put a little bit of air into it, and you've got a highly detailed face, which is your performance. For the theatre, all you do is put more air into it. It's the same picture, it's just got more air behind it. Obviously, you put a little bit more intensity into the smaller one because it's going into it needs energy, but the sort of distilled energy, if you like, rather like Scotch as opposed to a pint of Guinness. So you distill the energy down so it's still small but powerful, but that goes onto the camera, goes onto the celluloid or the film or whatever they use nowadays, and that's your basic film performance. But on both occasions, you're striving to tell the truth as much as possible. But I always tend to start off small with my performances and then blow them up, as it were, to fit a theatre. I hope I've answered that okay.
Are you working on any new projects at the moment?
Well, it's a bit difficult at the moment because we're right in the middle of this pandemic and theatres are shut, so it's a bit difficult to work in the theatre, unfortunately. I have just completed a pilot for what you call a mockumentary, but sort of in the style of The Office, that Ricky Gervais did. Similar sort of thing, which we've got, which has gone very well. So that's in the final stages of being edited together, and then we'll be, pushing that around the business and trying to get that commissioned. But and I'm writing a screenplay as well at the moment. I've just recently finished a tour of Calendar Girls, which was a fantastic show to work on. I mean, it was so beautifully written. It was the music was written by Gary Barlow and the lyrics by Tim Firth and the play by Tim Firth. He'd done it as a play originally and then converted it into a musical, which worked absolutely fantastically. I mean, there were so many wonderful moments in it. I mean, Tim Firth is very clever. He managed to counterpoint the tragedy and comedy together in such a way that it made an immensely powerful effect on the audience, because one minute you'd be laughing your head off and the next minute you'd be crying your eyes out. I mean, it was exhausting. I mean, I used to sit in the dressing room and listen to the show on the relay, and I'd be sitting there in tears, and I thought, I can't carry on like this. I can't carry on for an 18-month tour crying my eyes out every twice a day. I'm going to go nuts. We played at De Montfort Hall in Leicester, where unfortunately I injured myself because there's a sequence where there's a tug of war and we all had to stamp our foot onto the stage. And I stamped my foot down rather too enthusiastically, and something went pop in my knee. There's a wonderful story. When you're a young actor, it's all about the part. When you're a middle-aged actor, it's all about the money. But when you're an old actor, it's all about the parking and the painkillers.
For many years, John Hendrie was the designer at the Little Theatre, but I believe you worked with him quite early on in your career.
Ah, now we come to it. The legendary John Hendrie, who I understand is a bit of an institution at the Little Theatre at Leicester, and I'm not surprised. My first job with him when I was 17 years old, at my 18th birthday, at the Leeds Pavilion in Folkestone, and he arrived as our new designer. And it was weekly rep. We were doing a play a week with a midweek changeover, so that meant we opened on a Thursday, which meant that we did a run through of the show we were going to open on the Wednesday. We did a Wednesday matinee, a Wednesday evening show. Then we'd take the set down, put the new set up overnight. We'd work all the way through the night, have maybe a couple of hours sleep if we were lucky, come back and work all the next morning up until the dress rehearsal, do the dress, do the show, the opening night. And it was absolutely like that, absolutely incessant for 30 weeks. And John was absolutely magnificent. How he did it, I don't know. I mean, he had these terrible workshops that were under the pavement at Folkestone, which used to be very damp, but he somehow managed to produce these amazing sets. And they used to turn up, and I actually used to get quite excited. I thought, wonder what Johnny's come up with this week. I wonder what it's going to be like. And invariably, the tabs would go up on the opening night, and the set would be revealed, and the audience would always give it a fantastic round of applause. I mean, it was great. I have to say, he's probably one of the best designers I've ever worked with, at least one of the top two. And I don't say that lightly. I've been in this profession a long time. I'm 65 now. And I'd say that John Hendrie is one of the best designers I've ever worked with, and a lovely man. I mean, we used to work all night, and he used to put the soundtrack of various musicals on, and I will not be able to listen to Artificial Flowers in Mac and Mabel again ever without thinking about that wonderful time at Folkestone Rep where I was knackered at about 4 a.m, helping John build the set, stinking of size, and we were doing a production of Sweeney Todd on a postage stamp of a stage, which is maybe a little larger than half the size of the Little Theatre stage. And that had to have 5 sets. I thought, how is he going to do this? How's he going to get 5 sets on that tiny little stage? Anyway, he managed it. He designed it like a series of pages of a book opening. So we had a system of pulleys and ropes that would pull a flat away and open to reveal a scene. Then you'd pull another set of ropes, and another one would open, the middle one, and then another one would open, and then you had the acting area in front of those 4 sets as another set. And he managed all of that. Unbelievable. The tabs were just about to go up, and I looked up and I said, John, and he said, what? I said, we need to mask the ropes, the white ropes that are used to open the flaps of the set. I mean, oh my God. So we held the curtain, rushed up with handfuls of black paint and just smeared it all over the ropes, got the buckets and the ladders off stage and took the tabs up to the customary round of applause from the audience out front. No, John was an absolute legend. It's just a shame we're all getting a bit older, because I'd love to work with him again.
I'd like to thank Seb for appearing in this podcast, and thanks also to all of our other guests. Our next episode in the new year will, I hope, feature voices from within the theatre building itself, with a look at our stage opening. Fingers and everything else crossed.
You've been listening to Backstage, the podcast of Leicester's Little Theatre. To find out more about our season's shows, or to get involved both on and backstage, visit www.thelittletheatre.net.